Welcome back. Fossils are an undeniable part of nature. All agree that fossils exist in 12 rock layers referred to as the geologic column. But when and how they got there is what separates the evolution story from the biblical account of creation. Let's take a look. Fossils can be bones, shells, teeth, parts of an organism replaced by minerals, or even the impression of a single cell. Anything that lived in the past can produce fossils. Until the late 1700s, most Christian pastors and most scientists believed fossils were the result of a worldwide flood several thousand years ago. Then evolution thinking took over. Decades before Darwin's 1859 book, the scientific community and much of the Christian church had already rejected a worldwide flood. Instead, they accepted an evolutionary explanation for fossils. Geologists, both evolutionists and creationists, agree that there are layers of rocks all over the earth, and that these rock layers can be grouped into 12 types by the index fossils they contain. Several of these rock layers are found on top of each other in many locations. Geologists, both evolutionists and creationists, agree that these 12 rock layers are in a specific sequence or order, with the Cambrian layer on the bottom. These 12 rock layers are called the geologic column. The geologist who invented the basic scientific concepts used to create the geologic column was Nicholas Steno, who believed the Earth was about 6,000 years old and that the fossils containing rock layers were deposited by Noah's flood. Like much of evolution theory, the geologic column is partly true and partly false. A true part of evolution is that the Earth has a sequence of 12 fossils containing rock layers. A false part of evolution is the claim that these rock layers show 500 million years of history. To a geologist who assumes deep time, millions of years, the geologic column shows over 500 million years of common descent. To a geologist who believes in creation, the geologic column shows created kinds of plants and creatures killed in Noah's flood and mostly laid down over a 5-month period. Many creationists speak against evolution by saying the complete geologic column does not exist anywhere in the world except in textbooks. But this is a poor apologetic. There is strong and convincing evidence for the overall sequence or order of the geologic column. So why suggest there is not? It's much better to start a discussion about the parts of the column where creationists and evolutionists agree, and then move to the parts of evolution where we differ. Creationists and evolutionists agree on the sequence of the fossils containing rock layers, but disagree on the time scale. Creationists do not accept as valid many of the assumptions of the evolutionists, such as their no creator, no flood, and deep time assumptions. These unprovable presuppositions control the science of evolutionists, leading them to anti-creator conclusions. The geologic column is an important scientific discovery because it helps us better understand the original variety of creation and how so many amazing plants and animals that God created have now gone extinct. Concerning this column, evolutionists correctly point out that it has a sequence of fossil-containing rock layers. But then they ask us to imagine that the plants and animals that left these fossils descended from a bacteria-like common ancestor. Evolutionists claim the geologic column shows millions of years of common descent. In reality, evolutionists impose the assumption of common descent and of millions of years on the geologic column. So how are we to interpret the geological column? Both evolutionists and creationists are confronted with problems understanding the geologic column. That will always be the case since fossils provide us with very limited information. Therefore, scientists, both evolutionists and creationists, develop scientific models in attempts to explain how the column came to be. Those models are simply explanations based on the presuppositions of those making them. Again, fossils provide very little information about the animal that died. One can easily think that a bird fossil is a dead dinosaur, or that a dinosaur fossil is a dead bird, or that bones from two different creatures are bones from a single creature. If the claw on one creature looks similar to the claw on an otherwise completely different creature, the evolutionists assume that these creatures had a common ancestor. The only alternative explanation acceptable to an evolutionist would be that a similar looking claw evolved twice in two different creatures. The explanation that a creator God used a common design feature in two separate creatures, well, it's not allowed as a possibility. As Christians, we know that God created each animal kind during a 6-day period thousands of years ago, because God has revealed that to us in the Scripture. When evolutionists assume that each kind descended from a previous kind, they're making a false assumption, and they then force their scientific models to conform to such false assumptions. Part of the evolution story is their tree of life, with an imagined first life form turning into every plant and animal that ever existed. Evolutionists have a hard time drawing this common descent family tree. For example, evolutionists do not agree on how to place dinosaurs into the evolution's tree of life. Since 2017, there have been 3 very different but equally valid ways they place dinosaurs into the tree. Placing humans into the tree is a second example. A 2016 article published by the American Geoscience Institute reads, "The homonym human family tree is frequently revised, but researchers disagree about where many fossils should be placed on the tree." God is God. He could have created the various kinds with features that could be put into a single logical family tree. It appears God did not do so, since evolutionists are having great difficulty attempting to draw such a family tree. And even if an evolutionary style family tree that agreed with all observations and data could be drawn, it still would not mean God used evolution to create. The true history of how God created the universe is revealed in the Scriptures. Thank you so much for watching this series on a Christian response to evolution. You have seen how there is both truth and error in the evolution story, and how that story is based on unprovable assumptions like no creator, no flood, and deep time. Use what you have learned to help remove barriers to the gospel as you tell others about Jesus. God's richest blessings.